Welcome aboard. Once you have located your seat, we ask that you please step out of the aisle.
Well, good morning and happy 4th of July. A couple of you are with me. I'm excited about that. Nobody should celebrate freedom more than people that follow Jesus. I mean, Jesus brought us freedom, and the fact that we get to live in a country that's got a lot of freedoms is even better on top of that. And so I hope you got great things you've been doing this weekend and great things still to come. Today, though, we are talking about freedom. But before we get to freedom, I actually want to talk about something else. I want to talk about confusion. And so I want you to take a minute and just kind of think back. When was the last time that you felt confused? Okay, and for most of us, it's probably been the last 12 or 18 months, but you're kind of confused. Something you thought you knew, something you thought you kind of had figured out, and it wasn't. And it didn't, and it brought confusion to your life. Now, there's a difference between confusion and not knowing something, okay? Not knowing something just means I don't have the information, and that doesn't make us feel confused. That doesn't really upset us because, we can go to Google, right? You can YouTube how to fix this or how to solve this next level on your video game or whatever it is you're not able to do right now. You can get information, that's no big deal. Like I'm not on TikTok, okay? And I don't know how to post videos on TikTok. And you know how much that bothers me? Not at all. Not at all, because I'm not interested in that. And if you don't know what TikTok is, let me put it in different terms. Like, I don't know how to fly a plane. I don't. If you put me in a cockpit and said fly the plane, I'd have no idea what to do. I would be confused about it, but you know what? I don't care because I'm not flying a plane. I don't have any plans on flying a plane. And honestly, none of my confidence is based on knowing how to fly a plane. So I'm not confused about that. I just don't have the information. And there's all kinds of things in our lives where we don't have information. But what I'm talking about is where you're confused. And so think back, when was the last time you were dazed and confused, right? It was overwhelming. And by the way, that's a bad movie you shouldn't see, but it's a great phrase. So dazed and confused is a great phrase to describe how we feel when the rug gets pulled out from under us. And really, we get confused when something we were confident about changes. When we felt like we knew, we felt like we had figured out, we felt secure, and something has changed it. Something has disrupted it. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're at a job that you love and you've been working at and you're thinking, hey, for the next 5 years, 10 years, maybe even the rest of my career, I'm going to be doing this and working here and I'm really excited about it until on Friday they tell you we don't need you anymore. That's confusing because this was the direction of my life and now all of a sudden it's not. When the marriage that you entered into for a lifetime, that you were so excited about, you were so sure of, and on that day you got married, you thought it could never be any better and you don't want anything else for the future. And now you're looking at it going, are we good? Are we going to make it till Christmas? That's confusing. That makes you feel dazed and kind of unsure about life. When the little baby that you brought home from the hospital, you're so excited about, and you thought, this kid is perfect. This is going to be the perfect life. Everything's going to be great. I'm so excited. And bang, 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 they're 18 or they're 20 or they're 25 and they're living their life and they start making decisions that are so different from what you would do and different from your family and you're concerned for them and you're like, what just happened? What happened? Or maybe it's even bigger than those things. Maybe there were some things in your life that you were just sure about when it came to God, when it came to life, when it came to the way everything was supposed to go, that now you look at it and you just kind of shake your head. Things changed so fast and got so turned upside down that you don't have that confidence anymore and you feel confused. And that's the thing about confusion. See, confusion kind of creates this fog that spreads over your whole life. And it doesn't just stay in one place. It starts off with work stuff or family stuff or financial stuff, but then it spreads out over everything. And it moves between being a little annoying all the way up to almost paralyzing. Like, I don't feel like I know what to do. I can't even make any decisions because I'm living in this heavy, heavy confusion. And if you haven't been with us, that's exactly what we've been talking about. We have been talking about the baggage that comes with our lives and how we get rid of it, how we check that baggage. And so we've been reading and looking and working through this letter called Galatians. And it's super easy how we got the letter Galatians. A man named Paul wrote it to some people that lived in a region called Galatia. And he was telling them, you don't have to live like this. And what this is, or this they were living, was a life that had a lot of guilt that was wearing them down. And you've experienced guilt. You feel like you owe somebody and you just can't make up for it. And it feels heavy. It kind of weighs you down. And he also wrote to them about a performance life, which you've probably, if you haven't lived this, you've probably experienced it, where you're always trying to make people happy. You're always trying to please the people around you, and you feel like you always have to prove yourself. And it's cumbersome, and it just wears you down after a time. Or maybe, as we talked about last week, it comes down to identity. Who am I? What actually defines me? What defines my life? I mean, you may not know this, but there's a generation in our country right now coming up that identity crisis is a very real thing. They're not sure who they are. They're not sure what life is supposed to be about and how it's supposed to look. And it feels very unsettling. And you lose that confidence. It becomes very foggy. And here's the good news. You don't have to live like that. You don't have to live with that baggage and the weight. And one of the things that this letter to the Galatians does in almost every single paragraph is tell us over and over again this incredible truth that earning weighs you down, but grace frees you up. That feeling that you have to earn everything, that you have to make up for where you feel guilty, that you have to prove yourself, that you've got to figure out your identity, that you have to be the one to solve all your problems yourself. That whole earning thing, it's just a terrible life. It's just too hard. But grace, God's goodness, God's love, God's blessing, the path, the plan, the future that God has for you, that frees you up. That feels completely different than the earning life. Now, it doesn't mean there's no effort. There is effort, but our effort isn't towards proving ourselves and earning everything. Our effort is towards following. And it's an incredibly different kind of life. And that's the life that God has for you that we discover in Galatians. He doesn't want you to live your life confused, wondering about your purpose, wondering about how to get ahead of things, wondering why things are the way they are. Because confusion creates a fog. Confusion creates a fog, but when we forget to remember. We get confused, we forget who God is and what God's done, and we live in a fog. So why do we forget? What is it? What's going on that allows us to know better but not do better? And that's exactly what we're going to look at today in Galatians chapter 4. So if you've got a Bible, if you brought an app with you on your phone, we're in Galatians chapter 4 and you want to follow along, I would encourage you to do that. Because in Galatians 4, Paul, who wrote this letter, is confused. He is confused about the Galatians who seem to be confused. He's confused about their confusion. I don't know if that confuses you, but it confuses me. Basically, what he said is this. He said, look, you had this life, and you knew it was no good. You knew it was too hard. You knew it never worked out. And then you found something better. You found freedom. You found release from all that baggage. You got out from under the guilt. You got away from the performance. You found better, but for some reason, you're going back now. And he's confused. He doesn't understand. Why would you do that? It's kind of like you've been eating healthy gourmet food and you're giving that up to go eat table scraps. It makes no sense. Nobody should do that. You shouldn't live that way. You already know. The old life. The frustration, the weight, the struggle. You already know that, and you already know that you have something better. Why in the world would you go back? And to kind of pull this out, he asked them a couple of questions. And the first question we're going to look at, he says, why would you choose frustration when you can have freedom? Why would you choose frustration when you can have freedom? Look at Galatians chapter 4, verse 18. Verse 8. Verse 8 in Galatians chapter 4. And he asks this simple question. Verse 8, formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those who by nature are not gods. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to these weak and miserable forces? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? You're observing special days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that somehow I've wasted my efforts on you. In other words, and we're going to keep reading, keep your finger there, but he's just what I said. You saw it, you lived it, you had better, and you're going back. Why did you forget this? What is going on? Verse 12, I plead with you. He's desperate about this. I plead with you, brothers and sisters, become like me, for I became like you. You did me no wrong. As you know, it was because of an illness that I first preached the gospel to you. And even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. Instead, you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Christ Jesus himself. Where then is your blessing of me now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? As I said, he's stuck. He doesn't get it. They're confused, and their confusion is confusing him. Why would you do that? Why would you trade the freedom that you had for more frustration? It just makes no sense. You were living the life. You see, when Paul came to these people originally, it was because he had gotten sick and he had to stop. He wasn't planning on being here. And he wasn't at his best. But as he was here, he began to tell them who Jesus was and how he was following Jesus, and he was encouraging them to do the same. And they were interested. They listened to his stories. They watched his life. They lived together and hung out together, and they saw that Jesus seemed to make a difference in Paul's life. And over time, they made it a very important decision. They went from being interested in Paul's following of Jesus to wanting to follow Jesus themselves. And they did. They made Christ the very center of their life. And it completely changed everything. It changed how they saw the world. It changed how they saw themselves. They put the baggage down that they had been carrying. I mean, it was a huge difference maker in their life. But they lost it. They lost it. They got confused. And this is what I think happened. And I think the reason that this is what happened is because this is what I see happen today. Because we're really no different than they are. We have the same hang-ups. We have the same issues. We have the same concerns that they had. And in essence, what happens is when we lose joy, it makes life confusing. When we lose joy, we start looking around and going, I don't know. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't think this is working. You know, I used to think that. I used to believe that. I used to think this was really important, but I don't anymore. And you know what's behind that almost every time? Is one of two things. One of two things. And they're almost exact opposites, but they're so opposite that they're touching on the back end, if you know what I mean. It's like they're so far apart, they're actually touching behind you. These two things, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know if they are the cause of it or the sign of losing joy, but they're so wrapped up in it that it's a guarantee anytime you see this person has either lost their joy or they're about to lose the joy that they have for life. The first one is apathy. It's that place that you get to where, honestly, you just don't care anymore. You just kind of shrug your shoulders at everything. You're just kind of drifting through life. Yeah, you go to work and you try to do a good job, and, you know, it'd be great if they paid you more money, you know, whatever. And yes, you have a family and you love your family and you're glad for them and you want good things for them, but at the end of the day, it's kind of, yeah, they're there. You're just kind of checking the boxes, going through the motions, and your whole attitude about life is, you know, well, maybe it'll get better. I mean, it's okay. Maybe it'll get better. And here's the key thing for somebody that's dealing with apathy. They know that they're waiting for something. They're waiting for things to change. They're waiting for something to enter into their life. But the kicker is they don't even know what they're waiting for. It's apathy. And it's a joy killer. And whether you've already lost your joy and you become apathetic, or you become apathetic and you lose your joy, I don't know which is which, but you lose it. And then all of a sudden life seems very confusing. It seems very unsettled, foggy. So that's one side of it, is apathy. The other side of it, and like I said, they're so far opposites that they're actually touching, is grinding. The grinder. I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to solve it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to crush my next goal. I'm going to check off my list. I'm going to have the perfect family. I'm going to manage my health. I'm going to do. If you know somebody that's a grinder, that just seems obsessed about the next thing, I can tell you, there's a really good chance they've either lost their joy or they're about to lose their joy. Because you know what a grinder does? As soon as they accomplish the thing they've been grinding on, as soon as they get done, you know what's next? Whatever they have to do next. The next thing they've got to accomplish. And the real trap for the grinder is, sooner or later, they're going to come up against something that they can't manage, that they can't overcome, that they can't checklist, that they can't control, they can't manipulate, and they hit a wall, and it becomes incredibly frustrating. And if they haven't lost their joy already, they do as soon as they realize, no matter how hard I try, no matter what I do, no matter how much work I put in, I'm never going to get this, whatever this is. And the problem is, whether it's apathy or grinding, it's a life based on what I can do. And it steals your joy. And as you lose your joy, you begin to live a very confused and foggy life. But there's good news. Just like there's joy killers, there's also joy givers. Now, and I'm going to tell you what they are, but I'm going to tell you right up front, they're counterintuitive. And when I tell you what they are, your first response is going to be, no, that's not what gives joy. That's not how it works. Joy is having lots of money and lots of freedom and lots of options and all these other things. You know, the things we're convinced are joy. But let me tell you what the joy givers, the real joy givers are. And I'll prove it to you. The first one is compassion. The thing that gives people joy is compassion. And when you hear that, you might think, well, isn't that for the feelers? Right? The people that are kind of like emotionally up and down all the time, you know, they're crying at commercials and they're happy and then they're not. And then, you know, isn't that what compassion's all about? No, not the kind of compassion I'm talking about, at least. Compassion is a willingness to feel with someone and then take action. So I see that you're sad and I feel that with you and I'm willing to do something about it. I see that you're celebrating. I see that good things are happening in your life and I'm willing to do something with you and something about it. I see that you're struggling and I see the frustration in your life and I'm willing to do something about it with you. That's compassion. I'm willing to walk with you. I'm willing to invest in you and I am willing to do something about it when I can. That's what compassion looks like. Compassionate people are not doing it for the sake of joy, but they find themselves filled with joy when they live out of compassion. The second joy giver is serving other people. When you actually put somebody else first, when you take time, when you take your energy and you do something for them, for someone else, not because you get paid to, not because you'll look bad if you don't, but just because you want to. When you serve someone else, it actually brings you joy. And the last one, and this is probably the one that's going to get the most pushback, the last joy giver is sacrifice. Sacrifice. When I am willing to give up something that's mine, my time, my money, my rights, my priorities for you. Not because you've earned it, not even because you deserve it, not because, again, somebody's manipulating me into a situation and I kind of have to, but I willingly and freely choose to give up something of mine for my friends, for my family, for my coworkers, for the people in my community. I'm going to sacrifice. And we don't do it for joy, but when we sacrifice, we find ourselves filled with joy. And again, you might think, well, that's kind of churchy stuff, and that sounds like something a churchy guy would say, and maybe it makes sense, but here's a litmus test. Do you know anybody that does those things? Who do you know that's, it's not all the time, nobody's perfect, but who do you know that's kind of compassionate, the way I just described it, that seems to be willing to serve other people, that even occasionally sacrifices and gives up stuff? When you think about that person, would you describe them as somebody that's filled with joy or somebody that's lost their joy? My guess is most of you would say, you know what, they actually seem like they have joy. It doesn't mean their life is perfect. It doesn't mean everything is up and to the right and their world is good all the time. It just means that, honestly, if I had to describe that person, I would say, yeah, they're They're joyful. But to me, here's the clincher. Do you know somebody who's the opposite? Who says when it comes to sacrifice, no, I'm keeping what's mine, I'm getting what's mine, and I'm trying to get more of what I want. That when it comes to serving, it's not that I'm against anyone else, but I'm not putting anybody else first. It's really about me. It's about what I want. It's about me getting things the way I want them, when I want them, and how I want them. That if I've got time for somebody else later, then I will do that. But ultimately, it's about me. And when it comes to compassion, it's not that I struggle to see that other people have feelings and situations and life stuff. The reality is, I don't have time for it. I'm sorry. And I hope you feel better. And it'd be great if things work out for you. But the reality is, no, I can't get involved in that right now. If you've ever met anybody like that, would you describe them as a joy-filled person? I mean, I wouldn't. I've met those folks. They're not joyful people. And because they don't have any joy, their life is confused. And in the confusion and the fog that they're living in, they're making decisions that lead to more frustration and heavier baggage. See, that's exactly why Paul was so adamant when he's talking to these guys and saying, don't make this trade. Don't trade the freedom that you have for frustration. And he kind of caps it all together. He talks about this whole thing there at the end where he talks about, you'd have torn out your eyes for me and all this. And what is he talking about? It's very simple. Like I said, when Paul came to them, he wasn't doing well. This wasn't a planned stop on his visits. But he had to stop because he was sick. And we don't know for sure. People think maybe he had malaria, maybe he had some kind of bad eye infection or whatever else it was. He was laid up and he wasn't getting better quickly. He was going to be there for a while. But even in his sickness, he shares Christ with them and he says, it's something amazing happened. You embraced Christ, you found that freedom, and it turns you into those joyful people. You were serving me. You were sacrificing for me. I mean, he's exaggerating. He says, you would have even torn out your own eyes and given them to me if you thought it would have helped. That's where you were. Why did you give that up? Why did you change that? What brought about the confusion that made it seem that this was a good direction to go? He asked him another question. He asked him another question in verse 17. He says, why would you choose misinformation over transformation? Look at verse 17. Why would you choose misinformation over transformation? He says it this way, because the Galatians are just like us. They had people in their ear all the time. And he's talking about those people in verse 17. He said, those people are zealous to win you over, but for no good. What they want is to alienate you from us so that you may have zeal for them. In other words, they're doing what they're doing so that you'll care about what they care about. They don't really care about you. They care about you getting on board with them. Verse 18, it's fine to be zealous, provided the purpose is good, and to be so always, not just when I am with you. My dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you, how I wish I could be with you now and change my tone because I am perplexed about you. He's really struggling. And he sees the same problem that you and I face. He sees the Galatians and he's telling them, look, I get it. I get that you got these influencers in your ear all the time, telling you what life should be about, pointing you in lots of different directions. Again, it's no different than what we experience because you and I have people in our ear all the time. Social media influencers, celebrities, entertainers, social critics, politicians. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. That are always telling you, this is what you should believe. This is what your life should look like. This is how it's supposed to work. These should be your priorities. These should be your values. This is what your morality is. This is what gender and sexuality and all these other things should be. It should be what we say they are. And they use misinformation to try to get you to get on board with their plan. They point you to anything and everything except, and this is the key, following Jesus. They have an agenda. And Paul's pointing it out. He's saying, yes, I know people are telling you other things. I know people are in your ear. I know they're trying to redefine life. But they have an agenda, and it's not following Jesus. And you know from personal experience that following Jesus brings you freedom. And you also know from personal experience that not following Jesus brings you frustration. Why would you choose to listen to the misinformation from the misinformed that are trying to take you somewhere else? He's struggling. That's why he says it's the pains of childbirth. He's kind of opening a window to his heart. He's saying, just like a mom struggles, just like the process of giving birth is hard and painful and difficult, he goes, that's how I feel about you. I hurt for you. I hurt for this. I'm not just trying to correct you to get you to do what I want. I'm not just mad at you. I'm not trying to force you into something else. I am hurting for you because I see you buying into this stuff. I see the confusion in your life, and I know what it's going to cost you. I got to be honest with you. When I read that, I just kind of had to stop for a minute. Because I'm not equating myself to Paul, but I feel that too. And the truth is, so do many of you. As a pastor, I can't tell you, and I'm not trying to get you to feel sorry for me or be, whatever. So many times right before I go to bed, the last faces I see are yours. And I pray for you. And so many times the first faces I see in the morning are yours. And I'm praying for you. And it doesn't happen a lot because I'm a sound sleeper, but every once in a while, I wake up in the middle of the night and you know what I see? I see your faces. And I'm praying for you. And the reason I'm praying for you in many cases are the normal things of life. Because I know somebody that's struggling because they've had a hurt in their heart and they've had something difficult come into their life that they didn't expect and that they didn't want. And oftentimes it's because there's a need that needs to be met because there's a job or there's a situation or there's a health concern or whatever it might be. And I'm praying for those too. I gotta be honest with you. There are times, oftentimes, where part of the reason is because I know that there's a confusion there. That people are opting for the frustration over the freedom that they can have. That they're listening to the misinformation instead of the transformation that God wants to bring into their life. And as they do, it hurts. Not because you've done anything against me, and not because I'm anything special, but because I know, just like Paul did, there's something better for you. There's a different life for you, and it doesn't look like the old one. It looks like a transformed one. And you felt it too. Maybe you've got a friend. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's somebody that you've known for a long time. And they're followers of Jesus, and you look at their life and you look at what's going on, and really about the only conclusion you can make, not because you're judging them, not because you're putting them down, but you look at them and you say, it feels like they're in a fog right now. It feels like they're maybe missing what God has for them. And it hurts. It hurts you because you want better for them. And that's what Paul's expressing. That's what you have felt. It's what I have felt. Because you know that the transformation is so amazing. He says it would be transformed, that your life would be formed after the life of Christ. That your life would be marked by moving from meaningful moment to meaningful moment. That you would see the life that he has for you, that it's a life of freedom that allows you to turn around and live differently. The power that comes with a transformed life, the change that happens in your life, the focus, the meaning, all of these things come with a life that's been transformed. It becomes beautiful. It becomes colorful. It's filled with taste and good things. You see, transformation is the answer. The life transformed, the life formed to Christ, that is the answer to your anger problem. That is the answer to the materialism that you can't shake. That is the answer to the guilt that you carry with you. That is the answer to pleasing people and having to perform your way and prove yourself. That is the answer to the substance abuse that you can't kick, to the marriage in crisis, to the things you can't get over, to the healing that needs to happen in your life. All of these things come with a transformation that happens in Christ. You see, that's what the people in our church need. That's what the people in our community need. You and I, we know the answer. We have the answer. It's life in Christ. That's how you move out of the fog. That's how you experience freedom. It's the change that comes because you follow Jesus. That's all good, right? It helps. The idea that remembering who Jesus is, remembering what Jesus has done, remembering clears away what was confusing. And that's really good. That's good information. And that's a very church kind of thing to hear. But if you're living in a fog right now, remembering clearing away what was confusing doesn't help you a lot. If you're living in a fog today, what you need is something that you can put into practice today. And Paul gives it. He gives it. In verse 12, he says something. He says, imitate me. He says, I am not confused right now. I am not at a season in my life where things are foggy, where I feel confused. And so the best thing you can do is imitate me if you feel like you are confused. If you feel like you are in a fog, go ahead and imitate me. And you know what? He tells us the same thing. He said, well, I don't know, Paul. I don't know. Well, how am I supposed to do that? The point is, you imitate somebody that is following well right now. And here's the deal, that's going to change over time, right? I mean, in my own life, I had times where I'm very clear and I don't have any confusion and the fog seems to be lifted. But there's other times in my life where I feel like I'm in a fog. I feel like life is confusing. And just like you need somebody to follow when you're confused, people need to follow you when you're clear, right? So we do this together. That's part of the reason, by the way, as a church, that's part of the reason we do community groups and ask you to get into small groups and do things like Better Together next Sunday night, because it allows you to meet other people and walk with other believers in Christ so that you can either be the person that they need to imitate or you can connect with the person that you need to imitate. And it would be nice if it was that easy, right? Oh, just imitate somebody that's doing it right. And I wasn't satisfied with that. So I went and started looking. And I started reading through the New Testament and looking for things. What are the qualities? What are the things? I mean, how am I really going to know if this is the person I should imitate or not? And I came up with a big, long list, like 15, 20 things. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to remember all that. But one of the things I noticed as I looked over that list was very simple. They actually all fit into about 3 buckets. There were about 3 qualities that all these other things fit underneath. And I thought, well, I can remember 3 things. So hear me, if you're in a fog, if you feel kind of confused and you're willing to actually imitate somebody else, let me tell you who to look for. First of all, you need to look for somebody that has joy. Somebody that has joy. Their passion is for Christ. Yes, today may not be their best day. Yes, they may have struggles just like you do. Yes, there may be things at work and things at home and all kinds of stuff going on in their life. But at the end of it, in the moment, in the present, they still seem like somebody that has a joy about their life. That even though they have difficulties just like you, they still have joy. That's one quality that you need to look for. The second quality you need to look for is somebody that has hope. People that have hope. Hope is about the future. It's their confidence that the future is in Christ. It's not about what I do, it's about what He has done. It's not about what I can manage, it's the promises He has made. And while I don't know how everything's going to go in the future, I do know that He holds the future. So my confidence is in Him. Again, doesn't mean everything's perfect. It doesn't mean everything goes according to plan. It means I have joy today and I have hope for the future because I know what Jesus has done and what Jesus has promised. And then finally, people that do good. People that do good. Because they have joy, because they have hope, it frees them up to do good. They don't have to be so self-absorbed anymore. So if you're looking for somebody to imitate, if you want to get out of the fog, look for people that have joy, that have hope, and that do good because of their humility and their consideration and the fact that they just seem so grateful. Imitate them because that will help pull you out of the confusion, out of the fog, out of that mind-boggling choice in a way that nothing else can. You see, you and I, we're going to remember. We're going to remember what Christ has done. And we, as followers of Jesus, you know this, but I just want to remind you, there's nobody that has more joy than you do. There's nobody. There's nobody, there's no thing, there's no nothing that's going to give you more joy than following Jesus. And if that feels a little foggy, if that feels a little hazy, then get with somebody that gets it right now. As a matter of fact, nobody's going to have more hope than you do either. As a follower of Jesus, you should be a hope dealer, right? I mean, it's just coming off you all the time. You are a hope dealer because of what God has done for you. That's who we are. We don't have a life that's defined by temporary strife. Our life is defined by who Jesus is and what He has done for us. And it allows us then to be for each other. So we're not going to live our life in a fog. We're going to embrace the freedom that Christ has given us. Say no to the frustration and the misinformation and say yes to the transformation that He wants to bring in our lives as He changes us to be like Him and live out the life that He created us to live. Let's pray together and then we're going to continue to worship.